I'd like to hand the floor over to the moderator. Thank you. I'm Ma Chang-mo of KMI. We've gone through 3 presentations. I think now you have some keywords in your head: nutritional value and environmental value of blue food, and the personalization of seafood, and how important it is to put ourselves in the shoes of consumers. And with that, we have 3 designated discussants. I think this panelist is leading of alternative meat for the first time in Korea. Please welcome her with a big hand. And last but not least, Professor Lee introduced the case study of Nofima, and in the seafood industry, we talk a lot about Nofima because they have their own advanced laboratory and research facilities, and we are joined by the expert in smart farming, Professor Park Jung-hwan of Pugyang National University. And we are also joined by Director Hwang Jun-sung of the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. I think Mr. Hwang is extremely busy these days because there are many issues he has to handle, and he is in charge of various aspects of the policies, fisheries policies in Korea. So I would like to turn to the speakers, the panelists first, and I would like to give each panelist 7 minutes. Let us start with Professor Lee. In this World Ocean Forum hosted under the theme of Blue Taxonomy, we have this fisheries session. I really enjoyed the 3 presentations. These days, we became extremely interested in what we eat. Well, as you know, we find joy in the eating behavior, and we really enjoyed the taste. And in the past, it was all about quantity, how much we can eat, and then we move on to how good the taste is. Now we are talking about the value of the food with the concept of blue food. And Korea is well posed to become the leader in this field. As you know, in a month's time, we will see whether Busan will be able to host the 2030 World Expo, which seeks to resolving global issues through international cooperation. And I believe that theme of World Expo is closely related to today's discussion. The Korean experience of tackling and successfully resolving issues will be shared with other countries through World Expo 23. And there are 5 agendas for us to pursue as a nation. First is to nurture future talents, focusing on values. Rather than memorizing information, we should focus more on raising talent who can ask good questions. And second, digitalization. Korea is the digital leader, and we should be extremely good at digital transformation. The key here is hyper-personalization, and each and everyone can, using speech recognition AI, determine what he or she wants to do throughout the day. And AI will be there in order to come up with some recommendations for what to eat and what to do. I think that's the direction of the digital transformation. Then what to eat, that's the consideration, capturing carbon issues, the climate change. Well, not just food production, but also food consumption and food processing generate carbon emissions. When you cook food, then you consume energy. When you discharge the food waste, then you generate carbon. So, well, I think, well, you can even say that up to 50% of carbon emission is from food consumption and food preparation, the entire food-related cycle. And here we have to see the importance of health. As Dr. Kim mentioned in his presentation, Korea is a super-aged society, and every year 1 million people will join the senior group. Senior citizens at 65 years old and older has at least two underlying chronic diseases, and it is quite difficult for them to know what to eat and what not to eat. Do you know what a single portion is based on the level of energy you have, based on your energy and other biological information? Depending on your energy efficiency, you have to determine how much you eat, but no one knows that. And I believe, well, this is something to be covered by AI recommendation, what to eat and what not to eat, and how much you should eat. Such level of personalization is required. The last is food security and aquaculture, fish farming related to production will be critical from the perspective of sustainability. And as you know, the food is keen on securing food supply. But food supply is not smooth because in a matter of several decades, we have twice as much global population, and there are at least 10 million companion animals in Korea. That is why we have such a shortage of protein supply. And we need some alternative, and I believe blue food is the answer to ensure food security. In a nutshell, not all people will consume the same food. Each will enjoy what they like in a healthier and in a more valuable manner, and what to eat, and how to consume, and how much to consume, and how to enjoy that. I think that will determine Korea's status in its leadership in the area of blue food as well as the blue food technology. And in that sense, well, today's discussion is very meaningful and timely. Last but not the least, in order for us to create an ecosystem, I think it's all about people. We need some technological aspect, and we need some monetization and commercialization idea, and the brilliant ideas and innovations initiated, led by the private sector. Well, to that end, I believe we need some platform for first movers. And when those first movers compete against each other, then we can see the best and the brightest, and that best and the brightest will become the next Dongwon Fisheries and the industries like next unicorn or next leader of the new industry. And that's my expectation for this industry. And this is the end of my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lee. So in this era of the digitalization and also the super individualization, how we can make consumptions for value, and also he talked about how we respond to chronic diseases and also the various insecurity, and how we can promote the growth of food industries and cultivate talent. Next, Kim Yang-hee, CEO of HN Novatech, please. Good morning. I am CEO of HN Novatech. My name is Kim Yang-hee. We are developing raw materials for alternative meat. So when we first initiated researches on alternative meats, at the time, already the many food companies in Korea developed the soy-based meat. and also they had a lot of IPR patents. So we thought that we may have to target different niche market. So we looked for seaweeds in order to find out the vectors that do have the taste of meat. So our product is based on seaweed. So from seaweed, we extract the substances that have the similar taste of meat, and based on that, we develop the alternative meat. And I believe that Novatech is the first company that succeeded in developing raw materials for alternative meat. That's why we are under a lot of spotlight. And also we extracted our substances from natural materials, natural food, and our substances or the raw materials are now drawing a lot of attention as a natural flavor additives. So here I would like to make comment from business's perspective that recently one of the foreign media said that the alternative meat has very low carbon emission and therefore contributing a lot to carbon reduction. However, it's a super processed food with a lot of additives and chemicals. As you know, the consumers are very demanding nowadays, and they take care of environment, and also they have a lot of interest in their health, and they try to make smart, wise choices that can benefit their health and environment. And in the sense, I believe that alternate meat have to be developed with more diversified natural substances so that it could be free from the stigma of food filled with a lot of chemicals and artificial additives. And with this in mind, we have to develop more diverse kinds of alternative meat, and I believe this is something that the food processor should go for.
네, 감사합니다. 김양희 대표님.
Thank you. So in the environment and health, these are the two keywords for the development of alternative meats. And I think, well, there are various issues we have to address down the road. There must be some limitations in developing the market itself. And I'd like to turn to you once again about that matter. Now I'd like to turn to Professor Park Jong-han of Bukyong National University. Good morning, I'm Park Jong-han of Bukyong National University. I came down with a common cold, so I might cough a bit. So I'd like to ask for your understanding as to that. While the session focuses on blue foods and the blue food tech innovation or blue technomy, I'm very honored and privileged to be part of this wonderful panel. I'd like to thank the organizer for having me today. Recently, I have attended some blue food related seminars and conferences as a speaker. The nutritional value of marine products is widely well known. But in addition to the nutritional value of the seafood and social value and its environmental values have been highlighted. Recently, giving birth to this new term, blue food. Blue food, this terminology has become quite popular. So as I attended various seminars and conferences, I tried to give some definition of blue food. Although it's rather embarrassing to say that blue food is loving. But from a nutritional perspective, it helps the health of the entire family as well as the individual member of the family. That is why it is so loving. And the seafood, compared to livestock industry and agricultural industry, this fisheries and seafood industry, if you look at the consumption or the production, the structure is rather different. And in case of the seafood, you do the capture, you do the fishing, a very primitive form of securing food. But you know what? Well, the seafood industry also is involved in aquaculture, the seafood farming, which covers both the start of the livestock industry as well as the agricultural industry. And that is why, well, I believe that that is such a loving and love-giving industry. And seafood consumption is very high in the least developed countries and the most advanced countries. In the middle-income countries, the consumption is rather limited. So I think, well, since blue food or seafood is there to ensure the livelihood of the least developed countries, I believe it is loving. It is the expression of love for our neighbors. And another key aspect of blue food is that in the process of consuming the food and producing the blue food, carbon emission is rather limited and mitigated, and there are various steps we can insert in order to enhance this carbon emission related properties. That is why this is the expression of love for our planet. That is why we see such a great potential in blue food, and compared to the agricultural and livestock industries, there is such a huge room for further development. Nevertheless, there are many challenges we have to successfully tackle for the successful development of the blue food industry across the globe. As mentioned by Ms. Chang, the supply of the raw materials is one of the most critical issues, since the seafood is secured through the capture activities, and this leads to some limitations in securing the raw materials, and even aquaculture is highly dependent on the natural environment as well as the climate. And the seasonal changes would affect the level of production. That is why, although we are widening on strengthening, establishing our foundation in the market, we need to go further when it comes to the creating a stable foundation for the blue food industry. And I feel such a great responsibility in that regard. Well, to summarize my comment, as Dr. Kim mentioned, blue food and blue tech should not be seen just from the should not be seen from the perspective of the producers and distributors only. We should have a wider view toward the blue food industry to secure the supply and production and seamless supply, production, processing, and all the way to the consumption. Well, I think these days everything is interconnected with each other. That's why rather than finding and designating one ministry responsible for the blue food, I think we need to coordinate the efforts across the government in order to promote the development of the industry. Thank you.
네, 박장 교수님.
Thank you very much, Professor Park. Now, focusing more on fisheries, he shared us with a lot of insight. He also presented the big picture that includes the production and how blue food technology can be extended. I believe he really pointed out very important message. And now we will listen to the final panelist, Mr. Huang from the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. So, Director Huang, please. Good morning. I am in charge of fisheries policy at the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. My name is Hwang Jun-sung. In fact, in the audience, there is a people who was my boss, so I'm a bit nervous. Listening to all the presentations, I felt that, in fact, there are a lot of criticism that go to the ministry. So we have provided the policies to protect the fishery industry and other primary industry. That was our focus. But then from 2 to 3 years ago, I think things have changed a lot. That the fisheries should now be viewed from the perspectives of consumers. And we have to establish a new platform that are based on consumers. As mentioned by Mr. Ma next to me, so under his leadership, for 5 major Korean seafood, we are now working on how to innovate the seafood production to consumption, the entire ecosystem. So what I focused before in setting fisheries policies was how to increase the sales. That was the only thing. But then, in the future, what's important is how to produce the seafoods that customers look for. And rather than selling raw food, how we can process them effectively, and also develop the production system that could be beneficial for these processed foods. In other words, there has been a major shift in our focus from producer-oriented to consumer-oriented. And we now plan to produce some research outcome by the end of this year. Another project that we are engaged in right now is to promote seafood from the perspective of food sovereignty. So what I mean by food sovereignty means that we have to respect the consumer's right to choose. Consumer's right to choose and eat the ones that they want in a secure manner. So how can we manage supply chain in order to ensure stable supply of seafood that consumers want to eat? For example, let's say that the consumers want to eat flatfish, but we only produce the fish that are not flatfish, then we cannot cater to customers' desire. So in other words, how to ensure the stable and convenient supply of the seafood that consumers want. So building a system to realize that's the new focus for our policy making recently. Today, the theme of our discussion is blue food. We are now entering into a Super A society, which implies that the food consumption market may decrease and diminish. So that was our concern and worry. But then we found that as we move into the Super A society, in fact, the consumption of seafood will actually go up because among the elderly, there is a growing need for seafood consumption because they have to take high nutritional value food. So we are now preparing for policies to respond to the changes. Recently, we also talk a lot about value-based consumption. Up until today, as long as what we promoted was that the seafood is good for health and seafood is tasty. But now we have to prove whether it really has a value to our health and what kind of seafood is beneficial for what aspects of the health. So for this, we are planning for a research project. And regarding blue food, Last year, we had to establish some policies, so somehow we were belated. We were late in our move to respond to this new trend for blue food. But anyway, I met some companies and CEOs, and from conversation with them, what I found was that Korea can actually have some leadership in some blue food. Of course, when it comes to production, Korea is lagging behind. And with all the disadvantages that we have in the production environment, Korea can never become a leader. Then in what area can we take leadership? So the answer lies with the cultured meat or the so-called K-food. So by producing processed blue food, I believe we do have great potential and competitive edge to become global leaders. Of course, when it comes to cultured meat, Korea is lagging behind right now 2 to 3 years compared to other leading companies. But for the processed blue food, I believe we do have great potential. So from next year, we will launch a dedicated fund to promote blue food, and we will also conduct various research. So in fisheries sector, there will be more investment going on. So, and also we will make sure that the fisheries policies will focus more on the consumer aspects. So these are the changes that we are now pursuing at the ministry. So anyway, the Ministry of Oceans will do its best in order to provide more benefit to businesses and help them. But I think the biggest challenge for fishery industry right now is the unstable supply of raw material and raw food. So in that sense, again, we also have to pursue some innovation in production system in order to ensure stable supply. Anyway, I promise that we'll do our best to be of best value to you. Thank you very much, Director Hwang. Recently, the Ministry of Ocean and Fishery, I also felt that they are striving hard to come up with consumer-based, consumer-oriented policies. And I think things will really look different if you change your perspective from supply-oriented to consumer-oriented. I have a short question to Professor Lee that cultivating human resources, I think that's very important. And also promoting startup is very important. But in terms of policies, where should we set priorities? So can you please comment on that and answer the question? I believe building successful example is very important. Regardless of what areas, we cannot have a big bang transformation for all sectors all at once. Rather, we have to identify some pioneering area, and also we have to create some successful examples so that others can follow suit. And for that, we have to provide some financial assistance and also the policy assistance. And in the past, that's why we built the cluster, but it's more about the physical infrastructure. And nowadays, the focus is more on software. So I believe in order to promote and trigger innovation, the key is produce people like Elon Musk or the Kakao Talk, the second Kakao Talk. For those who, for the areas that are not charted. So we have to develop human talents who can go for uncharted territory. And also the university should strive to provide coachings for those who challenge themselves and push the envelope. I created the food tech department at Seoul National University, but there was a lot of resistance and opposition that the food tech department, its name is in English, so a lot of people oppose that idea. And also some people raised the question that it's not different from existing major. So when I initiated this effort, However, then the Ministry of Agriculture followed my suit and tried to expand that. And also the food tech, what's good is that we can attract a lot of private investment. The existing food and fisheries industry, they have to heavily rely on government subsidy and government support. But food tech is mainly driven by private sectors and private players, and also it has a huge market. Korea is not the only country that experienced global warming or food insecurity. So if we can make successful example here in Korea, then that example is actually applicable to all countries around the world, because global warming or food insecurity is something that we all share, and therefore young talent, we have to help them. So in terms of the finance, experience, and also policy, so that they can develop a successful model that can be commonly applied worldwide. So I think producing a good example.
예, 감사합니다. 혹시 그 김양희 대표님, 제가 최근
And I'd like to turn to Ms. Kim Young. Many people are interested in the alternative meat these days. They show such an experience, but they are not sure whether it has the economic feasibility. So how long do you think you have to go before making it economically feasible? So in the process of competition against other food sources and other alternative protein sources, you have to be rather sensitive to the economic feasibility. So what is your view on the economics of the alternative meat? How far do you think, you should go in order for it to take a leap forward? Would it be okay for me to ask this kind of question? Well, how long should I wait? I myself do not know for sure, sitting here. But what I can tell you is, through the pandemic, many people came to have some interest in alternative food or alternative meat. So alternative food enjoyed some popularity for some time now. That has cooled down a bit. But food is of critical importance. Food security is one of the crises we talk quite frequently about. Considering that, I believe alternative food will modestly but gradually grow. In particular, seaweed, such as laver and kelp, and the marine ecosystem are widely embraced as a carbon sink, helping us in responding to and preventing the further progress of global warming and climate change. So alternative food businesses, I believe, need to take some pride in what they do. We are growing slowly, but we will be steady. Slow but steady, since we are in the right direction. But in that process, I think the government's role is indispensable. So I would like to ask Director Huang for his unsparing support. And now I'd like to turn to presenters for any additional comment. Each of you has 3 minutes. Rather than saying what I was not able to cover, since my presentation was too brief, I think it might not be easy for you to understand the sensory-based and consumer experience-based product development and food development. But I believe it is quite important for you how these two are interrelated and correlated. We first use our senses like, well, the sense, the smelling sense, and the visual sense. But since before you eat something, you see that and you smell it, and this is how you determine the quality of a certain type of food, like seafood. And I believe through app service, you can show how the eyes of seafood is changed, and when the shape of the food is, when the fish is changed in this way, then this shows how fresh the product is, and such an information should be distributed and circulated. So we should be able to give some information to consumers so that they can determine how fresh and how good the quality of the seafood is with their eyes and with their nose. And that kind of services is currently available at Nofima. So with that information, consumers can make an informed decision, and rather than being too sensitive. And in some consumers may have a neophobia without actually trying it. And we have to help them with some information to let them understand why they have such a resistance to a certain type of food. And even when using this kind of information, we can help producers, because if the processing is not done in a proper manner, then we might create some awful taste and awful odor. But I don't think such a work can be done by any single business. This should be initiated by the government with the participation of businesses and the subscaled investment. This will create a larger scale consortium across various seafood producing industry. And I believe this is the way for us to go.
Yeah.
So I talked about demographic aging and also the environmental changes and how they trigger the emergence of alternative food and also food for the elderly. But some of my comments may be the repetition of the previous comments, so I tried to make it short. I said that we have to develop consumer-oriented policy and consumer-oriented approaches. If you look at the researches that have been done so far, and also the media talk a lot about customized or tailored approaches nowadays. And I think this actually indicates some emerging trend that we have to focus on consumers, and develop food that are tailored to meet individuals' need. But a lot of research show that we are somehow lagging behind in these approaches. We now experience population increase, environmental problems, and rapid demographic aging. And so I think what's important is to have a research that really focus on customer-oriented approaches and develop products that cater to customers' needs. So yes, these kind of senses, the olfactory, visual senses, they're all important, but we also have to take care of processing. And I believe that the processing and the five senses, they are somehow associated in many ways. And as researchers, I believe we have to take and conduct more consumer-oriented researches, and also from policy perspective. So the ministry and the relevant agencies provide various assistance to promote the food industries. And I believe this is truly beneficial for many people. And however, the Ministry of Ocean and the Ministry of Agriculture, they're in different ministries, and their roles are divided. So somehow I think what we need is a more integrated, unified assistance For the aquaculture, the Ministry of Ocean focused a lot on digital twin in the past, and recently their focus is now shifted to blue food. So I think more progress will be made in blue food area, and this will also be an opportunity to raise the public awareness for the value of blue food.
네, 저는 그 청년 창업가로서
As a young entrepreneur, I'd like to share with you my comment. There were various issues I didn't even think about, and the most fundamental issue was that many businesses were so small in size, and because of the aging phenomenon in the fishing industry, there were not many young people. Most of the people I met and worked with understand that we need to be changed, and they need to innovate the industry, and they need to work from the eyes of, they need to put themselves in the shoes of the consumers, but they are saying that, well, they are too old to do that. They understand the need for change, but they feel as if it's not realistically possible and plausible. And I also mentioned the lack of institutional support. But over the last 3 years, I realized that many things have changed. The Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries is making dedicated efforts, and they are also expressing their interest in growing and supporting the seafood industry, and various local authorities as well as the relevant government organizations are rendering support for the fisheries industry, the seafood industry. So I believe those challenges have been growing gradually addressed in a successful manner, and many second generation or third generation fishers are jumping into this sector, but there are still some outstanding issues. Although we understand what customers would want and what we have to do, but there are not many companies which can actually produce a tailored product. The Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries will provide support for fermented fish products and dried fish products. But in Korea, it is extremely difficult to locate a HACCP certified dry fish factory. And I searched the nook and cranny of the country to locate one. It's still quite tough, but I do not give up, and many people around me do not give up, because although the change is not tangible, we can feel the change and we can witness the change. And although the change is rather slow, I think we are changing the entire industry. It's changing in line with the changing landscape as well as the changing global demand. So I am hopeful that the fisheries industry will grow even faster, the entire market, in the future.
웰피시의 도전이
So why don't you give a resounding round of applause to Ms. Zhang, so that in our wish for the thriving businesses of Wellfish. Now we will open the floor for comment or question. And please identify your name and affiliation before asking question. No one? Someone at the back? Can anyone give him the microphone? The person in the middle. I would like to ask a question to Ms. Zhang. So food production is important, but I believe distribution and logistics are also important. And we have to prevent the spoilage and also the hygiene for food, because this is directly related with health. But somehow I think you didn't really mention about that. So can you please elaborate on how you manage logistics and distribution process or transportation process? Right, so we are dealing with fishery products, and therefore hygiene is very important. And we don't develop the relevant process by ourselves. But for packaging and distribution, I think things have been advancing. although I didn't cover the topic today, but I think in overall food industry, the distribution and logistics are most important part, and relevant technologies are constantly under development. And I believe we have to continue to take extra efforts to make sure the hygiene, to keep food fresh. So for that question, so yes, seafood, when it comes to seafood, maintaining freshness is very important. And hygiene is a key part for distribution and logistics. But today, we focus more on the blue food and food tech innovation. So we would like to see some extraordinary development in blue food sector, and somehow we couldn't really cover that area.
예, 안녕하세요.
Very nice to meet you all. I'm Choi Wan-yeon. I am the president of National Marine Biodiversity Institute of Korea. I was embarrassed to hear what Mr. Hwang mentioned at the start of his comment. I have been in this industry over the last 30 years. Although I'm currently working on the marine biodiversity, since the fisheries industry has been my home ground, as Mr. Hwang mentioned, transformation is truly underway. There is such a rapid and dramatic paradigm shift. I don't think we've done all wrong. Back in my days at the ministry, well, it was all producer-oriented. And there is such a shift. I've heard so many great ideas today, and then the great news too. What is the most important thing is the reliable and stable supply of safe raw materials around the year. And given the specific characteristics of seafood, such a stable supply is not as easy as in the agricultural industry. Although with the advances in aquaculture, well, things are getting better. Nevertheless, such a great transformation, well, the theme and concepts such as food sovereignty has been around over the last several decades, but now I think transformation is truly underway and is developing. That is why I am so grateful and I am so inspired. And the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, as well as the various national organizations, are deeply interested in the alternative food and alternative meat. And you started with the beans, but you shifted to the seafood. I have an office director sitting right next to me. Bean versus microalgae versus seaweed. I think, well, there should be a further analysis on the protein content. I'm so grateful that I am part of this discussion on the blue food and seafood, the love of my heart. And as I watched the discussion and presentation, I got a lot of great ideas. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you. I think we are up for the conclusion. Last year at the World Ocean Forum, we talked quite extensively about distribution technology. And after coffee, well, seafood is very actively and widely distributed across the world. It has the longest value chain in the world. So the seafood strategy, whether it's import and export, technological development is mandated and required. So that's what we considered last year. And when we took one step further to discuss blue food and food tech innovation this year.
So blue food is not about naming. I think what's important for blue food is to prove nutritional value and also the environment value. So we have to work hard to prove its nutritional value and also develop food that can be friendly for environment. And we'll be able to see a more diverse array of blue food. So we have to take the consumer-oriented approach, customized approach, and also we have to shift our focus from hardware to software. And I believe that this will also bring about a lot of changes in the future seafood industry. And we have to pursue growth strategies that are based on technology. Over the past 40 or 50 years, the seafoods have been exported from developing countries to developed nations. But then that paradigm got broken with the emergence of Norway. So aquaculture and also advances in food processing technologies have shaken the entire landscape. And I believe that this kind of innovation should emerge more in fisheries and seafood industries. And in particular, we have to pursue the software-based innovation. And in that sense, I think it's important to cultivate young business leaders and create an environment conducive for these new startups. So once again, I would like to sincerely ask you to continue to pay attention to this sector and support the growth of blue food industry. And with that, I would like to thank you everyone for your time. So this will conclude our session. Why don't you give a round of applause to the speakers, panelists, and also the moderator for the successful hosting of the session. And with that, we would like to conclude the fisheries session of the World Ocean Forum 2023. For those who are on the stage, I would like to kindly ask you to come forward a bit for a commemorative session.
다음 촬영을 함께 진행하도록